Hey y'all, it is Kobe R. Rice, and I'm back again for another daily write-in. So, as you guys know, today's Friday, obviously, and I did not have a write-in yesterday. I had a lot going on, but I am still trying to like get back in the groove of like doing these on a daily basis as much as I can to keep me accountable and to help you guys hold yourselves accountable. So, I am back with another double whammy today since I missed yesterday. We're going to do another double lesson, which actually, like, this is working out well for me and also for the continuity of my stuff because it's a lot easier sometimes to talk about plotting when you're able to give context to like what comes before and what comes after. And I'm actually really super excited to teach this particular part of the lesson today because today we're going to talk about sequences, aka the 8 adventures, so to speak, that you can develop for your story. One, so that it gives your story a lot of shape, a lot of flavor, a lot of pop, a lot of adventure, a lot of, twists and turns, but also still feels as though like you can manage the pacing and you can manage the direction of the story because you are planning it out in these 8 separate parts. So today we're going to give you a more shall we say, stronger definition. We'll give you a stronger definition of what the 8 sequences are in a story. Story meaning a novel, a novelized serial or serialized series, a TV series, a feature film, screenplay, etc. So we're going to define what that means in all of those contexts. And then we're going to go through what the specific sequences are. Actually, let me rewind that. I said that wrong. Then we're going to go into basically what the first and second sequences are of the 8 sequences in your story, what they are, what they mean, and I'm going to provide a checklist so that I'm going to provide a checklist so that when you come back to this a little bit later and you're trying to design your story sequence by sequence, you can actually check off every single detail that you have or don't have in that particular sequence. You can basically use it as like a reference guide. Thank you, Boo. I'm saying thank you because, again, my daughter is tuning into my lives. She's really excited that I'm like going live, even though I'm doing like the nerdiest thing ever, my teaching writing on a Friday. But hi, Mama, I see you. Thank you for your support. She said, okay, go on, Queen. I'm screaming. Oh gosh, I love her so much. She is like my most favorite person in the whole world. Okay, so let's get into it. And I do realize we probably won't have that many people signing on today, which is totally fine. You guys can just rewind this and watch it later. All right, so let's jump into it. And actually, even though I'm doing a double lesson today, FYI, more than likely I am going to um, shorten our writing sprint. One, because I don't expect that too many people are going to be signing on tonight, and two, because I'm also a little bit tired. It's kind of like a lot to work full time and then do this, and then I have like my other gig that I have going on. So I'm gonna reward myself and be kind to myself and cut us a little bit short tonight. But you are gonna get the full benefit of like a full writing lesson. Okay, so let's just jump right into it. And let me share my screen. I haven't changed my background in a while either, but I'm kind of feeling like the adorable kawaii, you know, black girl writer vibe. I'm feeling it, so I might leave that up. We'll see. All right, so I'm sharing my screen, and to be very honest, team, I'm not entirely sure how I feel about this cover photo here. Let me see. Can you see it? Yes, you can, because literally I just like slapped this together last minute. One thing that, like, if you ever decide that you're going to be a designer ever, one thing that you will value above all else is consistency, right? In branding, in your design, within your design, and then between your designs. And if you look really closely at the images I pulled from here, they're not exactly consistent with like the artist style that I've been using the entire time because I did this last minute. So for those of you with a keen eye, please forgive me ahead of time. So today we are going to talk about the 8 sequences. We're covering today's lesson and yesterday's lessons for sequences 1 and 2. And these two sequences in your story are called the status quo and the devil in the doorway. All right. Now, before I jump into these particular sequences and how they are constructed, I do want to remind you guys that Colby's Cozy Cafe is open. All right. And you can go into your description. Hi. You can go into not your description, my description down below and click on any one of these delightful goodies that I'm offering in my virtual cafe, including you being able to download free urban fantasy ebooks between now and the end of November. You can join the Manga Madness giveaway or the Colby's Cozy Creator giveaway for a chance to win either a complete manga, comics, and animated animation creator kit. Really amazing grand prize there, so definitely join. Or you can enter my Cozy Creator giveaway, which is open to all creators, writers included. And you can, if you have a chance at winning the grand prize of a free cozy fit, you know, a wearable blanket, slippers, fuzzy socks, a goodies set. So either s'mores, a s'mores maker, donut maker, popcorn maker, or waffle maker, right? A drinkies set, so hot chocolate maker or tea set, including kettle, or coffee maker, or a soda slash sparkling water maker, any one of those. And you can also finally choose a hobby set. So if you're a writer, you can choose the hobby set for writers, which comes with a lot of cool stuff. If you're an artist, you can choose the hobby set for artists. If you're a manga or comics creator, you can choose the hobby set for comics creators. And if you're a reader, because that's your hobby and there's nothing wrong with that, we love that around here, you can choose a hobby set for readers. Okay, so that's basically what's available for you guys. And also know that even if you join the giveaways and you don't win the grand prize, you still get an entry prize, which is really great. So, you know, over here, everybody's a winner. I know that some people don't like that concept of everybody's a winner. I do, because in real life, like we have to compete pretty much for everything. And I'm actually relatively good at that, even though I don't like it. But sometimes you just want to join something because it's fun and you get a nice little participation prize. And I'm here for that. Okay. We don't have to make everything hard on purpose in life. Like life is hard enough. So join the Manga Madness giveaway, the Cozy Creator giveaway. Even if you don't win the grand prize, you will still get an entry prize. And yeah, it's really great. And then, of course, we have the books of the day, which are the Coffee Break Screenwriter and Save the Cat, which will take us pretty much all the way to day 28 of this daily write-in, because we're really just talking about plotting. And especially as we go into sequences today, you're going to find more so than anything that the Coffee Break Screenwriter book is going to really help you out a lot. All right. All right. So having said that, let me jump into it. Actually, matter of fact, let me take care of a quick sound issue. I hear myself echoing from my child's room. So let me handle that. I'll be right back. Okay. We should be unencumbered at this point in time. All right, so let's jump into sequences 1 and 2. You guys know I love myself a good review. So let's talk about the 8 plot points super duper quick, only because essentially each of these plot points, for the most part, is going to be the final beat or the final scene in each of your sequences, right? So there's 8 plot points, like 8 major turning points in your story, and they come at the end of each of your sequences. So you see how like we're building it out? Okay, so let's review. Plot point number 1 is the inciting incident, which is the bomb that disrupts the MC's, the protagonist's status quo, right? Their life sucks, something happens, making their life suck even more, and they have to do something about it. Plot number 2 Plot point number 2, excuse me, is the first point of no return. That is the point in which the MC leaves their current life behind, and goes into a new world for a new opportunity, a new adventure, new love story, whatever it is. They're leaving their current life and they're going into a new life, new adventure. Plot point number 3, the midpoint. This is the moment or a series of moments in the story, in the main character story, where everything is going great for the character. Okay. This is always after they have stepped into the new world, and it is the highest, calmest, happiest, like most secure and safest point in the story until the end. Like literally, there's no higher point, no happiest point, no safest point than the midpoint in your story. And as you can suspect, after the midpoint happens, everything just goes to hell. In plot number 4, specifically, everything goes to hell with the crisis point, right? So the crisis point is what happens directly after we see the midpoint. And it is the very clear moment, right in the moment of happiness, where everything suddenly goes straight down to Hades, okay? Things blow up, the villain comes in, they breach the walls, somebody gets kidnapped, the Sith finds the rebel force base, etc., right? The villain basically storms the safe place, breaches everyone's happiness and security, and everything goes crazy. Okay, so we move from a place of safety in that crisis point to a place of peril. Everything is going downhill from here. Plot point number 5, the black moment. Okay, the black moment is the exact opposite. If you're looking at my hands on the screen, is the exact opposite of the midpoint. So whereas the midpoint was the happiest, highest, calmest, securest, safest point in the story, the black moment is the most horrible, the most unsafe, the most terrifying, the darkest, the most hopeless point in the story. That's what the black moment is. The character has lost everything. The worst things that could have happened to the character, all the worst things have happened. All hope is lost. It's the lowest point. So this should be a direct reflection, but like an inverse reflection of the midpoint. Plot point number 6, the second point of no return. This is the moment where the protagonist actually storms the enemy territory to end the conflict once and for all. Basically, they're leaving their current world, which was the new world that was just destroyed by the villain, right? And then they're moving into another new world, but this new world that they're moving into is completely owned by the villain, right? So if everybody they know and love has been captured by the villain, then they have to, and take it back to the base or whatever. They have to leave their current situation and go to the villain's territory and base to save everyone that they love. All right, that is the point of no return. Then you have plot point number 7, the third act twist. That's the moment where the MC and the villain are like very locked in like the ultimate struggle, the ultimate battle between good and evil, right? And the villain comes up with this dark surprise, a really horrifying twist that catches the protagonist off guard. So and subsequently gives the antagonist the advantage, right? So the MC is thinking like, yeah, I got this, I'm good, I'm fighting the villain, I'm beating the villain. Psych. The villain comes up with some new plan that throws him at the MC off of their game and makes us feel like the villain is about to win the battle, right? And it usually happens right as the protagonist is about to claim victory. Then finally, the final plot point is plot point number 8, the resolution and or new normal. Okay, it's the moment or the collection of moments at the end of the story where the main character has prevailed or has made significant progress. And in addition to the main character, like having won against the villain, and having won the external conflict, the external battle, don't forget that the main character is also showing that they've won the internal battle that they have with themselves, right? Whatever was unhealed in the beginning is now healed. Those 7 points in the character's critical history, are now like fixed essentially at the end of the story. Okay. So that's pretty much essentially what that means. In addition to this being the moment of resolution, right, we also realize that we have to establish what the New World Order is. Give me one second. Okay. we're also establishing what the new normal is, what the new world order is. What does the new world look like now that evil has been defeated, right? What are the new rules? What's the new territory? What's the new expectation? Or what's the new adventure, right? Um, if you're writing a series as opposed to like a standalone novel, though, like you have to also show that not only is there a new world order established or like a safer order, but that in some way evil still endures. Okay? All right. Sorry. Give me 1 second, y'all. I am mothering and I'm also I'm mothering, I'm also teaching at the same time, so forgive me. And it's like getting hot up in here. I don't know what's going on. Okay. All right, team. So that is the review of the 8 plot points. And as I'm sure you can imagine, right, we think about how these plot points are connected to the 8 adventures, and I just told you that each of the plot points is essentially the turning point at the end of each of the 8 adventures, you can probably start to imagine what the mini adventures are that come before each plot point. She says, "Okay, bye, mommy. Slay." Wait, what does she say? I'm going to read out her comment because she is so hilarious and adorable. My daughter says, "Okay, bye, mommy. Slay like you would serve because you do serve." Thank you, mama. I love you too. Have fun playing your game. She's a gamer like me, but she's more of a Roblox type of gamer, which I love for her. Okay, let's move forward. Although I wish you would play Animal Crossing for a change. I think you would really enjoy it. But anyway, moving on. Let's move on with the lesson. Okay, so those are the 8 plot points. Now that you know the 8 plot points, let's get into the status quo. All right, being sequence number 1. The status quo is the very first adventure that the basically that your character is having in their story. Now, mind you, this adventure sucks. It's not a fun adventure usually. Sometimes it is a fun adventure. Sometimes, like for example, actually, before you guys start reading all that, just focus on me right now. Let me take this off of me 1 second. Okay, so that I know you're paying attention to me, not because I'm egotistical, but just so I can get your focus, right? Um, so think about The Wedding Crashers. If you've ever seen that movie, brilliant comedy, brilliant buddy comedy, love it. One of the best that I've seen. The two, I forget what their names are, but basically the Vince Vaughn and Owen, whatever, something Owen, I forget. But the two main characters, they're having the times of their lives, right? They're goofy, they're silly, they're like hilarious and weird and like irreverent and like they love sleeping with women and all these things, right? And their entire lives are like just based on, well, not their entire lives. There's a season in their lives that's based on wedding crashing, right? So they're having a ball. They're bachelors, they're, getting the babes, and they're just having fun. It's wonderful. No attachments, no nothing. And then, right? Like, so it seems like it's all good. But then Owen Wilson's character has a moment with a woman after he's like, gotten what he needed or whatever, where he kind of slips up in his lie, right? And she confronts him, basically saying, "So, do you think that you're like mostly full of shit or just half?" Something like that, right? Something along those lines. And he realizes that, like, bro, like kind of what I'm doing, like it feels a little bit pathetic and sleazy, and I'm getting a little bit too old for this, right? So we start to see him kind of turn a corner when he realizes that what he's doing is like wild corny. You know what I'm saying? And that's the inciting incident for him, right? So boom, we're gonna pause at that example right then and there because it's an example of like showing the adventure, right? Showing setting up the context for the characters and then ending that first sequence with an inciting incident, like that outside trigger that makes the character guess and second guess everything about himself. That's what we're doing right now. Okay. So your character's life doesn't always have to suck, but there does have to be some type of inherent flaw, right? Some inherent flaw in the way that they're living their lives, or some life lesson that they're really missing out on that doesn't allow them to get to an even better life, right? And if you've seen the end of that movie, you know that Owen Wilson's character ends up finding real true happiness in like a faithful, loving, monogamous relationship with someone that he really digs. Like he's like, oh, like I'm really feeling this, right? That was his reward at the end for facing who he was, right? But his life, he thought that his life was great. He was enjoying his life. And then he realized that something was missing. And that was the thing that was missing, right? So in that way, that's his adventure, setting up the status quo of him being a wedding crasher, a bachelor, a smooth talker, just able to think on his feet, and things of that nature, just setting all those things up, not really being who he is and his authentic self, right? And then he has that trigger moment where he realizes like he actually doesn't feel fulfilled. So that's one way to set up a first adventure. Another way that what I like to do, because I'm a dystopian writer for the most part, so obviously like all things have to suck all the time for the character. I like to do what Blake Snyder calls the 6 things wrong, where their lives totally suck in every single way. They're not having fun at all. Life is not fun. Life sucks. And then something happens that makes it suck even more, that basically calls the character to attention, and makes the character who doesn't see themselves as the main character, they have to step up into main character status. And I really like that. I feel like life is a lot like that, right? Where you're trying to just live your life and stay in the background. A lot of us, not all of us, but a lot of us. But then something external happens that makes us rise to the occasion. And so that is something, I'm going to put this back on the screen. That is something that I want you guys to think about when you are developing. That is not the screen I want to show you. When you are developing the first sequence for your character. And I call sequence number 1 for most stories the status quo sequence. And in this particular sequence, you are explaining, basically not explaining, but showing us, the readers, the movie watchers, the series watchers, you're showing us what the status quo is around the hero, right? You're setting up their story, you're setting up their background, you're introducing the hero, you're introducing the critical history, and then you end with the bomb, which is the inciting incident, right? So in sequence number 1, the adventures that you are telling us about the world, about your hero and her flaws, you're also telling us why we should care, right? Why do we care about this hero and their flaws? What does her turf look like, right? This was beautifully done in The Last of Us with Joel, right? His world was totally fine. Single dad, maybe things are not so easy, but he's making ends meet for himself and his daughter. They love each other very much. His daughter's very independent. She remembers his birthday and gets him a present and all these things. And you can see the love between them, right? You can see what's going on, that he cares for her very much. And we understand their dynamic. We relate to their dynamic, right? So we actually really like both of our heroes. And then the bomb comes. And the bomb there, the inciting incident, is the cordyceps infection. Patient 0 has bitten people, and now everybody's biting everybody else, and the infection is spreading, right? It's actually very, very eerie. And it's, again, if you haven't seen the TV, I recommend, if you want to study The Last of Us as a story, you should definitely, in my opinion, go the game streaming route. You don't have to play the game, but just find the cutscenes they call them movies now. They string all the cutscenes together into like 2 to 3 hour movies. Find it and watch it. I promise you, you will not want to move from your seat. It does sequence 1 so, so well. So that's what sequence 1 is about. That is your adventure, setting up the hero, the world, their flaws, who they love, why. Like you're getting people invested in the hero. Okay. So if you're thinking about particular keywords, like let's say that you can't remember all the things that should go into sequence number 1, I want you to remember these 3. Wow, I can count, I promise you. These 3 keywords: their flaws, their wants, and their status quo. All right. At basic, that's what you should have in sequence number one. Okay. Flaws, wants, and status quo. And as an FYI, if you're wondering why like this particular part of the presentation looks different than the rest of the presentation, that's because these are slides from an actual course that I've been putting together for such a long time. But like, I guess now I'm kind of soft launching the course, being that I'm doing this 30-day write-in. But like, this is essentially like the result of me sitting down and thinking about story and what actually goes into every single part of a story. Like, this is the result. So you're seeing sort of like my first draft of this course, like you're experiencing it right now. Okay. Okay. So let's get back to it. Flaws, wants, status quo as sequence number one. Now, let's get to the most fun part of developing sequence number one. And that is the fantastical checklist, right? So let's say you have literally no idea what to write for the first of your 8 adventures in your story. You don't have to think about it because I put together this awesome checklist for you. Okay. So these are the things that you should probably see in any sequence number one that you write, no matter what type of story. Number one, you're going to introduce the hero. Make sure the introduction is a very clear show of who the character is, right? Let me think of a good example. Into the Spider-Verse, I think, does hero introductions really well, right? Um, I'm not even going to tell you because I feel like that's still too new of a movie for me to be spoiling on here. Go watch it and see how they do hero introductions. They're a little bit more heavy-handed in that first movie, but it works for like the dramaturgical structure they have in that particular movie. The way that they introduce the heroes actually really works. But that's a good movie to look at. I'm trying to think too. What was something that just came to mind that's actually kind of fringe. For those of you who are anime lovers, Attack on Titan, and you'll be crying at the end of that first pilot episode. FYI, just be prepared to have like your emotions all destroyed. To be barely real. Another anime that comes to mind now that we're on anime is Blood the Last Vampire, not the live action, not the animated series, the standalone 50-minute movie that came out that completely reinvigorated like vampire lore specifically for anime. The way Saya is introduced is like phenomenal, right? You can see who she is and who her character is. Study like literally those first scenes that characters make it onto the scene, that the hero makes it onto the scene. Study those scenes and figure out what you can do in your scene to introduce your character in a way that clearly, tells the audience who this character is, shows the audience who the character is. All right. Next thing, you need to make sure we see the hero's flaws. All right. We also need to discover in sequence one what the hero's primary want is, right? We need to also discover what the hero's current life or status quo is. Hint, it should suck. Or if it doesn't suck, it should clearly lack something significant or foundational, like with the wedding crashes example, right? Um, so that's important. You also want to establish the genre of the story clearly. Like if we're in a sci-fi opera, we need to see that essentially like on the first page, in the first scene, in a prologue. Like I don't care where we see it, but it needs to come in the first 5 minutes, 5 pages, of your story, no matter what medium you're writing in. That needs to read very clearly. A great example of this would definitely be any sci-fi movie that purports to be a sci-fi opera, cyberpunk, dystopian, like clear sci-fi genres where we have to establish a world. Study those to see how you can establish the genre of the story. Establish the tone and the mood of the story, right? Not all sci-fi operas are serious, and not all sci-fi operas are lighthearted and funny, right? So you want to make sure, like is your sci-fi opera or sci-fi series, is it family friendly or is it rated R? Like that has to be pretty clear as well. And obviously, like that's something that we can go into more depth in like a much later lesson, probably like later in the month or next year or something like that. But like establishing the tone and the mood are really important. The tone and the mood of The Matrix is very different than the tone and the mood of Star Wars, which is very different than the tone and the mood of The Fifth Element. All sci-fi, you know what I'm saying, slightly different genres. Well, two are kind of in the same genre, one is not, but the tone is very different. So make sure you're striking the right tone and the right mood. You also want to introduce the world the story is in. Do that quickly, especially in dystopian work. That just understanding what the oppressive regime is and how society is organized is like really, really important. So that we understand like where we are and basically what's at stake for the main character. Same thing for like any sci-fi that's not like realistic, grounded sci-fi for the most part. I think is pretty important to understand the world, right? And then you want to introduce the dramatic situation of the story. What is the character struggling with? What are the external circumstances that they're struggling with? And then what are the internal circumstances that they're struggling with? Right? We've gone over this ad nauseum when we come to um, excuse me, we come to the hero's critical history. So that's the internal struggle. And then we think about the macro social conflicts, the mesosocial conflicts, and then the micro, man versus man social conflicts, right? So what are the dramatic situations that your character finds themselves in? Okay. And then once all those things are established and we're invested as the audience, and then we're either into like Katniss's like daily survival routine, or we're interested in like, the Jedi Knights versus the Sith, and like how does Luke, play a role in their, unsuspecting farm boy Luke, how are these things bringing us in, right? Like once we're brought in and we're invested, then you want to hit the character with that plot point number one, the inciting incident. Okay. So as you can see here for sequence number one, you have all these things on this checklist to like basically establish. And then you want to essentially end that first adventure with the inciting incident, whatever that inciting incident is. For romance, and I'll be very frank with you guys, I'm not entirely like I do enjoy the occasional like paranormal or like fairy tale retelling. I'm not gonna lie, those can really hit, like those can really slap, but I'm not as familiar with the conventions of those genres, right? But usually for romance, the inciting incident is the meet cute between the main character and the love interest, right? And that has its own particular flavor. So I will say that I am considering under a different pen name that I won't mention here, maybe writing a little bit of paranormal romance and fairy tale retellings or something of that nature, but I just haven't broken ground on that yet. So we'll see. And once I do though, like I'll start telling you more about what that process is like. But I'm an action writer, sci-fi action, sci-fi thriller, dystopian, so I'm going to stay in my wheelhouse for now. Okay, that is the sequence number one checklist. And I'm looking to see if there's any comments. No, but I do have a watcher on Twitch. Hi. I can't even see who's on Twitch because I'm not actually on Twitch. But if you're watching, I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Um, my one viewer. Okay, so that's sequence number one. And if you have any questions, just like post them on whichever channel you're watching it on. But in the meantime, let's move on to sequence number two. Okay. Sequence number two. So the inciting incident has happened. The evil force has raided the village, or the name has been pulled out of the hat or out of the jar for the Hunger Games, and Katniss has volunteered as tribute. Or Neo is going about his daily life. He suspects something's going on, and then he gets the phone call on the mysterious cool Nokia phone or Motorola phone, and it's the guy he's been searching for his entire life, who confirms that the Matrix, whatever that is real, right? The inciting incident has happened. We know the character, we love the character, we're invested in the character. Now something has happened to the character, which propels us into sequence number two. And basically, for sequence number two, adventure number two, I call this the devil in the doorway. right? So basically, this is essentially, usually, all about the character's confusion and denial, right? Whenever something major happens in our lives, we have one of three reactions usually. And take these loosely: fight, flight, or freeze, right? And a lot of times in many of these stories, the character freezes or flees. To be very frank, in this early stage of the story, they either are like apoplectic or they're like, oh hell no, and they do a peace out. I'm not doing this, right? So this is the moment where the adventure where the hero ignores her destiny, right? But that is until the devil of the story brings the conflict to her doorstep. And sometimes, to be very frank with you, the devil is not always the villain. It is a lot of the time, but sometimes the devil is the love interest if it's romance. The devil is the mentor, right? The mentor understands, or the love interest understands what is truly at stake. They usually have more knowledge than the main character of what is truly at stake. And they see the main character not moving, so they do certain things to make sure the character does move toward that point of no return. Which, of course, being that this is sequence number two, that point of no return, plot point number two, is the turning point and the last point, the last beat in sequence number two. We'll get there. All right. So let's say this, okay? In Wedding Crashers, if I can remember this correctly, after Owen Wilson's character basically gets flamed by the chick that he just was with, okay, and he's having doubts, we literally see him, kind of moseying along, not really his usual self. His buddy, Vince Vaughn's character is like trying to get him to like continue the wedding crashing, and he's found the mother of all weddings, right? And Owen Wilson's character, like he actually talks to Vince's character, like, are we getting a little bit old for this, sir? Like, you're kind of doing a little bit too much. Like, I just kind of feel like, I don't know, I'm not really feeling this anymore. He's having doubts because, like, that chick put a seed of doubt in his mind, which has only been growing. But Vince Vaughn's character keeps bullying Owen's character. Not bullying really, but like influencing him to like just do one more wedding, right? Just do that one more wedding. And it's the mother of all weddings because it's like some big time businessman or politician. I forget who Christopher Walken plays in this movie, but he's playing a G character as usual. And it's the wedding of one of his, I think, his oldest daughter. And so they crash this wedding. And this entire time, like, Owen's character is like still, kind of doubtful, but then he turns on the charm. He does what he has to do. Okay. Um, but it's not as, he's not as, how do you say, energetic about it. And then he sees the beautiful youngest daughter of the OG character, right? Of the main, of the basically the guy who's hosting the wedding. His other daughter, who's unmarried, he sees her, and it's like kind of love at first sight, right? And it's slightly different than what he usually feels when he meets a woman at a wedding. And so that kind of becomes, in his situation, she is the devil in the doorway. Because it's essentially like a comedy, but it kind of turns into like a romantic situation because he's pursuing this girl, right? So it's really her, the devil, the temptress, so to speak, who's not even doing anything, but he's like so enamored with her that he follows her through the first point of no return, which is when the big time, big shot guy invites them to his mansion for the weekend, right? Or for the week or what have you. And then that's when Act Two begins for Owen Wilson and Vince Vaughn. Okay. Um, so in that instance, in the romantic aspect, it is the love interest who is operating as like the devil, the tempter, the one who beckons the main character through that point of no return. In kind of like hardcore sci-fi, dystopian sci-fi thriller, Usually, the devil in the doorway is like a mentor sort of figure, or the villain really like steps up to the main character and forces the main character to move forward, right? I think in Katniss's story, there really is no other option for her but to go into Act Two and move from District 12 into the capital. However, she does have a series of interactions, both with Peeta and with Haymitch, and with her family, obviously, before she moves from District 12 to the capital, before she moves through that first point of no return. So all of that sort of doubt, the sorrow, that having to say goodbye and everything like that, meeting gosh, what's her name? The one who also kind of becomes like her cheerleader and her mentor, meeting, those three individuals, her, Haymitch, and Peeta, that is essentially like the denial phase. That's her confusion phase. That's her like trying to figure out what's just happened to me, who's my ally, who's not my ally. She can't really ignore her destiny, but she's definitely like delaying it. You know what I'm saying? And then she is moved forward essentially by the external conflict of the story, which is that she has to be in the Hunger Games. It is required. And so she then takes the train or whatever they take, transport, and they move physically from District 12 to the capital. In Aliens, this is actually a really good one. They do this extremely well. Ripley, we're going to go back to sequence one for a second. She wakes up out of her hypersleep to find out that she's back on Earth. Her daughter has passed away because she's been away for like 76 years at this point. So she missed out on her daughter's life. She feels guilty. She feels awful. She's lost all her friends. She doesn't know anybody in this new world, in her new world, being that she's woken up 76 years later, and she's alone and she's traumatized from what she went through in the first movie, right? And so she finds she's interviewed by the company. They do not believe her about the alien situation, and they essentially strip away her rank. They strip away her, I think, her pilot license or whatever, however she was credentialed. Like they took everything. So this woman has lost everything because these people will not believe her. And her life sucks, it sucks. Then that's sequence one. Right at the end of sequence one, at the end of that adventure, that crappy adventure, okay, the inciting incident happens. And that inciting incident is the colony that this same company has placed on the alien world that Ripley and her team found the face huggers on. That colony has completely disappeared. The colonists are gone. They have no idea where they went, and they're afraid that Ripley's story is actually true, right? So they come to Ripley, okay, after they played in her face, after they said she was crazy and said, sorry, sis, maybe you were right because we tried to colonize that same planet that you were talking about, and the colonists are gone now. And so they bring that to her. That's the inciting incident. And bro, her break into sequence two, the devil in the doorway, where she ignores her destiny, is so amazing because the first thing she does when they come to her with this foolishness is that she slams the door dead in homie's face. Now, if that's not somebody ignoring their destiny and being in denial and saying nope, all the nopes, then I don't know what is. Okay. And it's just done so well. And so she slams the door. The guy, the snake that turns out to be a snake, and tells her through the door, listen, sis, I'm so sorry, but these colonists have disappeared. He kind of low-key says you were right, etc. Then she opens the door and she's looking at him like, really? Really? It's real. Okay. Then they go into her apartment. They're talking to her. They run down exactly what it is that they want her to do. They run down exactly like how they want her to assist the rescue mission or whatever. And again, she has a moment of hell to the no. I'm not doing that. She tells him, I think at least two or three times in that one scene alone, no, I'm not doing it. She yells at him. She kicks them out of her apartment. She said, I'm not going on the trip, right? That was her denial phase. That was her ignoring her destiny, right? However, the I don't want to say it's the point of no return, but there's a turning point in sequence 2 for Ripley, right? Where basically she says no and she's ignoring it, but she's been having these recurring nightmares, these recurring dreams about what happened to her and the crew. She's traumatized, she has PTSD, and she consistently is having dreams about this alien ripping out of her, which, if you look back at it, being that one of Ripley's critical history moments is that she essentially missed out on being a mother to her child. The face hugger ripping its way out of her abdomen is a very interesting image to look at, right? It's a very powerful image about the twisting of the experience of motherhood, where instead of her being able to be present and having a constructive, positive, impactful relationship with her daughter that's peaceful, and that's defined by love, she continues to have this horrific nightmare of an alien parasite ripping itself out of her womb, essentially, right? So it's powerful because on the surface, obviously, it's just scary. The aliens are scary as hell. And she survived this very scary incident, this survival horror incident. And of course, she's going to have nightmares and dreams about it. But also, it links to her deeper internal domestic horror, her psychological horror of having failed as a mother by not being there for her daughter. And that face hugger ripping itself out of her womb is a very violent and graphic representation of the failure of her maternal instincts, the failure of her maternal role, right? So this is why I love Aliens, because like it goes so deep, and James Cameron is like such a genius in this way. Um, it will always be one of my most favorite movies of all time, right? But to get back to the original point, she has these recurring dreams, and she knows that as long as she is avoiding the aliens, as long as she stays in her tight little world afraid, she will never be able to sleep well ever again. She will never be able to heal that internal and psychological damage that has been done by her experience on the Nostromo, right? I think that's what the ship was called. Okay. So after she wakes up once again in a cold sweat, she calls the dude and she's like, all right, let's go, let's do it, right? And this is essentially like how, in sequence number 2 for her, the devil of the story, which is the alien that has taken everything from her, including her chance at being a mother, has essentially triggered her to move herself from sequence 2 through the first point of no return, where she's now going to join the Space Marines and help to find these colonists who are missing. All right. So, in that way, that's how Aliens has set up sequence 1 and 2. And that's how, for Ripley, the denial is interrupted by the quote, devil in the doorway. So I want you guys to really think about, we'll get to the checklist in a second. You should really think about how your character is going to deal with or express the denial of the situation, their confusion in the situation. How are they going to, in a way that makes sense, ignore their destiny? For Ripley, she had to say no to this man a million times and slam the door in his face. As she was going to stay in her own little corner, in her own little chair. She was going to stay right there until the devil, which is the alien that has been haunting her for all these years, comes back to her doorstep and is like, I will never let you rest until you deal with this, right? So figure out what those two main elements are going to be and then really play into those in sequence 2. Let's get on to the checklist so that you know specifically kind of how to build this out for yourself and your character. Oh, keywords first and foremost, obviously. If you can't remember anything that I just said, which is okay because I ramble a lot, but I hope you're getting a lot out of this, you want to remember the keywords, right? So your keywords for sequence number 2 are denial, devils, and resistance. Specifically, your character's resistance to their destiny. The devils also being the internal devils that are chewing at them, and then the external devils, whatever the villain is, or whoever the villain represents, or whatever they represent, they are going to, in some way, continue to work on our main character, right? And the character, in certain ways, is going to show denial, confusion, and resistance. One other example, sorry, I just have to do this. I feel like examples are really helpful. And I definitely am going to do like a breakdown class on Aliens and The Matrix and probably some other movies. I think that's like the natural next step in this course or whatever. The Matrix. Morpheus calls Neo on the phone. That's the inciting incident that ends sequence 1 for Neo. Sequence 2 is all about Neo not knowing what the heck is going on. Okay, you know nothing, Jon Snow. That's what it's giving. Okay, so as you recall, after Morpheus has called Neo and says, "Yo, you need to get out the building because they on you, bro." Neo's like, he's with it. He's like, oh, I see the cops. I see the 5-0, the 4, whatever. Like, I need to get up out of here. Okay. So he goes ducking and dodging and all that and juking throughout the office, through the cubicles. And he's listening to Morpheus every step of the way. He trusts Morpheus every step of the way. Morpheus is helping him too. Like, he's avoided all the cops and everything. Then Morpheus said, you need to climb out this window, or like you're on the 60th floor. Climb out this window, climb up the scaffolding so we can like rescue you. Neo tries and he looks down and it's a wrap. He's like, mm-mm. He even drops the phone, which is also an interesting visual cue that his character is not ready to accept the truth about the Matrix, right? At that very moment that he's trying to climb up, or not even climb up, but like get around the window scaffold so he can get up the real scaffold, he's telling Morpheus, like, bro, this is not going to work. I can't do this. He's in denial. He is resisting the call to adventure, resisting his destiny, resisting his mentor, right? And Morpheus is like, bro, this is the only way. Like, you're going to get caught. It's going to be a wrap. They catch you. Okay. So he drops the phone, which means like essentially that's like a physical representation of him being like, nah, bro. He doesn't do it on purpose. He doesn't yeet the phone on purpose, but like he drops it. He goes back inside and he literally submits himself to the custody of the police officers, right? So in this second sequence, this is all in the second sequence, he's denying and he's resisting. The interesting thing about this sequence is that Neo finds himself in the interrogation room, right? And he's trying to use tried and true methods, excuse me, to like get himself out of the situation, right? He is still essentially, he's operating within the confines of the Matrix and his understanding of the Matrix, right? And it's not working. Like, this is the part where like basically he has to accept a new reality in order for him to escape, but he hasn't accepted it yet. Okay. He's trying to negotiate with the cops. He's trying to negotiate with Mr. Smith, thinking that Mr. Smith is like a part of the system, and he kind of is, but he's a bigger part of the system than Neo really understands and knows about, right? And Neo actually lucks out. He lucks out, where he knows like the machines, the AI, they know that Morpheus is after Neo, but they don't really know why. They don't understand like the true importance. So in many ways, oh, and I actually should have included this in the checklist. You should try your best, right, to show a tidbit or like a sliver of how the villain is naive, right? So this is not just about denial of the main character. This is about the villain's denial of the main character's importance, or the villain's disregard, right? They don't really understand who this person is. They just know that they're in the way, right? They don't understand like how dangerous this person can be, right? So actually, I might kind of edit my notes to update it. So yes, this is about the villain's denial as well. Mr. Smith doesn't know who Neo is. Neo doesn't even know who Neo is. And they're both trying to use their tried and true methods to resolve the issue. Fast forward though, Neo, once he's released by the cops, thinking that he's all good, but he actually has a bug in him, to help them track Morpheus down. Neo basically like gets picked up, by Morpheus and his crew, thankfully, because the AI did not understand who Neo was. And the crew is now like trying to walk him through what his true purpose and his destiny, right? And even then, Neo is still like, I don't know, man. You know what I'm saying? And it's like you're seeing all this crazy, fantastical stuff like in front of your eyes. You're waking up, you think you're dreaming, you have like you're living a life, right? And then something happens to you, and then you just wake up in your bed. And so you think it's a dream and you write it off as a dream, but it's not a dream, it's real, right? He's having all these experiences and he's still like, I don't know what's going on. And so it takes a little bit of threatening from Morpheus's crew and some coaxing from the love interest, okay, a second mentor, for Neo to really accept the truth. At some point, Neo even tries to get out of the car after having experienced all this craziness. He tries to get out of the car where he is safe with Morpheus's crew and tries to go at it on his own. And Trinity has to stop him and says, Neo, you've already been down this road. Like, you're trying to go at this alone. You've already been down this road. You know where it ends. Like, come on, bro. You know what I'm saying? So he's in many ways in this sequence, Neo is showing so much resistance and so much denial. And again, it takes the mentor and the love interest to really get him together, right? So at the very end of this sequence, when he meets the entire crew, he finally meets his like famed hero, Morpheus, face to face. And Morpheus gives him like a slight explanation of what's going on, but he basically he forces him to make a choice, right? The red pill or the blue pill. And he explains to him, the blue pill is going to keep you exactly where you are. You know what I'm saying? And whatever. Like, you can choose that, but you already know what that's about. The red pill, you get to learn the truth. And Neo, like, is like, all right, you know what I'm saying? Might as well, because things are already sounding real crazy and insane. And I don't want to go back to my old life. And I'm also being hunted down by the cops. So let's just do this. He takes the red pill, and that is the act out. That is the turning point and the beat, the point of no return, right? That forces him from sequence 2 into the next sequence, aka the next act. So let's talk about now what the checklist is, and then I want to summarize these points for you really quick. In sequence 2, you have a checklist, a lovely checklist here for you, okay? And so again, if you cannot remember all the things that should go into the checklist, here it is for you. Or if you can't remember all the things that go into sequence 2, here's a checklist for you. All right, so number 1, in sequence 2, we have to meet the villain in some way, shape, or form, even if it's like the character not meeting the villain, but like we as the audience meets the villain, like that has to happen. Like, we need to know who's causing all this drama, what the tea is, what's going on, what is the external conflict. We need to see that in sequence 2, essentially at the top of sequence 2. We also need to discover what the villain's want is, okay? We also then need to see your hero's resistance to denial of, oh, there's another of, sorry, and or ignorance of, that's what it's supposed to say, or ignorance of the inciting incident. So they're resisting, they're in denial, they're annoying, they're frustrating, they're stupid, and we're just over the hero at this point, okay? Then you also want to meet the supporting characters. If we have not met them in sequence number 1, we have to have met them in sequence number 2. Have to, okay? Because we're establishing essentially all the players, both the friends and the rivals, who are going to basically provide the rest of the subplots and also provide support or resistance and friction to the hero. We're also going to meet the hero's mentor, or love interest, or both, who will guide the hero into the new world. Okay, usually the hero, sorry to say, because they're not evolved enough, usually does not go into this new world willingly. They have to be pulled into it by somebody else. Okay, and that's actually much as like in real life, right? Like, if you're an introvert, and like myself, who loves to like be a homebody like myself, you're gonna stay stuck in like your little world until your friend shows up at your door or calls you and says, we're going out, right? Otherwise, like, you ain't doing it. It's not, you're not feeling it, okay? You're not jacking it, as we would say in New York. Okay, So you have to have the mentor, the friend, the love interest who's going to pull and guide the hero into the new world. We should watch, usually, not all the time, but we're going to watch the hero get her first call to adventure from the mentor. Call to adventure is like the mentor is going to literally say, hey, you're meant for something greater. You need to be doing this, right? And then in the next bullet point, we need to watch the hero ignore the first call to adventure from the mentor. This is why I love the Matrix so much. He literally gets a call to adventure on the actual phone from the mentor, right? Love it. Okay. And then when he yeets the phone accidentally off the building, and decides, I'm not going to follow the mentor's advice, that's us watching Neo ignore his first call to adventure, literally from the mentor. He ignored the call. Okay. We're also going to, in this next bullet point, discover more about your hero's flaws and personality through how she resists, denies, or ignores the inciting incident and the call to adventure, right? So it's really interesting. This is another opportunity for you to show the personality and the damage of your character by showing us how her resistance manifests. Maybe this character completely shuts down. Maybe they're shutting doors in the mentor's face, being mad rude. Maybe they're literally acting dumb and like being stubborn out of ignorance or deliberation. Like maybe they're deliberately doing these things. Like really figure out who your person, who your character, who your hero is, and being who they are, how would they respond, right? Rather, how would they resist or ignore the call to adventure? I remember, I forget which X-Men movie it was, but it was one where, what was it? X-Men First Class, something like that. I think it was that. Um, when Xavier and Magneto, when they were like young and like, still best friends or whatever, were trying to recruit X-Men to their school, to their team. And they met Wolverine, Hugh Jackman, in a bar. And like, before they could even, they said their names, like they were like, these cape wearing heroes. And before they could even say who they were and what they wanted, Wolverine said, bleep off, like F off, right? And it was hilarious because it was a very Wolverine way of like ignoring a call to adventure or resisting a call to adventure. And that was pretty much the end of that conversation. They were like, okay, bro, we'll holler at you like in 20 years, okay? So just in that one scene alone, we could see Wolverine's personality. Even if you hadn't seen any of the other movies, it was very clear how Wolverine ignores his calls to adventure when he feels like it, right? So just building those little moments where we can discover more about that hero and their flaw and their damages and their personality through their modes of resistance. Then you also need to have a moment, a clear moment where the villain is going to bring his fight, his beef to the hero's doorstep. Okay. So sometimes, and again, I'll say this again, sometimes it's not the villain, sometimes it's the mentor, or it's both, right? In Aliens, the villain is the alien in Ripley's dreams. It will not leave her alone. It's the devil in the doorway. For Wedding Crashers, it's the love interest, right? And she doesn't do it on purpose. She's not even really aware of Owen Wilson's character's existence, but her presence is what draws him into Act Two, right? Into Sequence Three. In The Matrix, it's the mentor. Like they literally call him again and like, okay, now that you're got roughed up by the cops, are you ready to listen now? And they bring literally their fight to the hero's doorstep. And actually, so does Mr. Smith when he ends up bugging Neo, even though Neo does not know he's bugged, right? So Mr. Smith is already using Neo to basically destroy the world and capture the characters. So the villain in that way has brought his fight to Neo's doorstep, and then the mentor and the love interest are bringing their fight to Neo's doorstep. Okay. Um, yeah. So those are some examples as to how the devil in the doorway can manifest in different ways. And then finally, you're going to end sequence number 2 with plot point number 2, which is the lock-in, or as we've been calling it, the first point of no return. And again, just to remind you, that first point of no return is the moment or the action and or the actual physical transition of the character, right? The main character from their current world into the new world. For Neo, his first point of no return was when he took the red pill. He sat in the chair. The mirror started to dissolve and look crazy. They started reading his vitals. He put his finger in the mirror because the matrix is starting to come down around him. And then he wakes up. Like the red pill is like some kind of chemical that wakes him up out of the matrix. And then we literally see him being birthed out of his pod and this whole thing, right? It's a whole transition scene. All right. With Katniss, she is, again, once again, through the transport, moving from District 12 to the capital. For Ripley, she essentially, you know what I'm saying, like meets the Space Marines and they get on the ship, right? And then their ship leaves the current world and goes into outer space and then lands on the aliens world, right? There's no turning back after any of these points. You cannot go back to your old world. And so the plot point number 2 is the thing that ends sequence 2 on a really, really strong note. And what you guys will notice, I'm going to stop sharing this. If you guys were kind of taking notes or what have you, what you're going to notice here is that sequence 1 and 2 together make up Act 1. Act 1 is essentially comprised of sequence 1 and 2. So that's essentially like when we first started talking about Act 1, 2A, 2B, and Act 3, we talked about them in like more general terms, and I did give you some points to reflect on and to think about. But when we start thinking about, sequences, the sequences themselves have a distinct flavor, right? And each sequence itself is its own separate standalone adventure that you can focus on developing from a story standpoint, from a structure standpoint, that you can then combine or put next to each other to create a really compelling, interesting, immersive, and like fast paced, I would say, like very economical first act in for your story, your novel, your screenplay. Pilots work a little bit differently, but like that's essentially how they work. Okay, so I hope you guys found that helpful. That was a mouthful. That was me talking for a straight hour, but I think it's something that can really, really help you in your writing journey. And I hope that you will use that in when you're developing your next story, or even just use those sequence building checklists to go through your first act of your story and see if you're missing anything, if there's anything that you can take from those checklists to use to shore up your current story. Okay. So having said that, I'm gonna sign off. I actually like talking about these movies really makes me want to like go watch them. So I'm just gonna like treat myself to that. Being like a little film nerd who hardly gets to watch films anymore because I'm so busy. I'm going to treat myself to that this Friday. So, your assignment, even though I'm not going to be here for your write in, your assignment is to look at the checklist for your sequences. And if you haven't built the sequences out, fine. Use a checklist and like write maybe, I would say 2 to 3 sentences per bullet point. And if you want to watch the replay of this, it will be up until probably the end of the year, to be honest. So make sure you take a screenshot, you take notes, and then for each bullet point, write 2 or 3 sentences as to what each bullet point would look like in the context of your story. And that is my writing assignment for you guys tonight. One last thing before I go, I never want to hold on. I never want to be remiss in making sure that you guys know that once again, Cozy's, wow. Colby's Cozy Cafe. This is what I get for loving alliteration so much. Colby's Cozy Cafe is open. It is always open, at least until November 30th. And feel free to grab some urban fantasy books. Go get the books of the day. Coffee Break Screenwriter by Pilar Alessandra. Save the Cat by Blake Snyder. Those are great books, and they, especially Pilar Alessandra's book, goes into the 8 sequences, and it will help you to develop out those sequences even more in depth. and just have some fun with these giveaways and the free prizes. And have a great weekend. Keep writing, keep creating, keep coming back. And I'll probably see you guys either tomorrow or on Sunday. I haven't decided yet, but I will schedule a live as soon as I can, as soon as I know what it is I actually want to do. Because I actually have to do some Thanksgiving shopping this weekend because we're about to burn up in this kitchen. And I hope that you are too. All right, team, have a great night, and I'll see you next time. Bye.